I want to thank all the panelists for your very thoughtful comments and all of the different ways that you're allowing us to think about hate crimes and its effects and how conflict resolution might be helpful. We heard a little bit about I just have a few questions, and then Kathy and I are going to pass this back and forth, so you'll get it from both of us, and then we'll open it up to the audience as well. But we heard a little bit about, in the first panel, about the debate about whether there was even a necessity for hate crimes legislation and why isn't a prosecution enough, a criminal prosecution. But in the instances where you do actually have a hate crimes prosecution and someone's been successfully prosecuted for committing a hate crime, can you talk to us a little bit about why that might not be enough from the perspective of the community? Why, if there are any lingering effects on a community after someone's been incarcerated or sentenced to 20 years in jail, what is there left to do? How can a community heal? Has it healed because of that prosecution, or is there more work to do? And what is that work that peacemakers and CRS in particular can do? And I'll open that up to anyone who wants to answer it.
I'm happy to start. So these are both the most personal crimes and the most impersonal crimes. They are the most personal crimes because it's an attack on your identity. You're black, you're attacked. Next day you wake up, you're still black, you're still Jewish, you're still gay. And you could be attacked again. So they're very, very personal crimes. They're impersonal because the perpetrator and the victim rarely know each other. In the plurality of crime, the perpetrator and the victim know each other. In a hate crime situation, the vast majority of the circumstances, they don't know each other. So even after you find the perpetrator, you prosecute her, you prosecute him to the full extent of the law, the next day, the person who's the victim still walks outside, and it could happen again. And so the question is, what can you do about that? What can we as a society do about that? And that is something that does not end with prosecution. I'll say one other thing about that, which is think about the impact of these types of crimes. The black family that just moved into the neighborhood. The person who burns the cross on their lawn definitely does not know them. They just moved into the neighborhood. It's a message crime to all blacks. Stay out of this neighborhood. This is not where, get out of this neighborhood. You're not welcome here. And the same goes for crimes against synagogues, crimes against two guys that walk out holding hands from a gay bar. We, the community, have to speak back against these message crimes and speak loudly and say that we reject the perpetrators of these crimes, and we are here to empower and support the victims. If the victims feel like law enforcement doesn't care about them, that peacemakers don't care about them, then they're going to set up vigilante groups. If I can't walk in my neighborhood safely as a Jew wearing a yarmulke or kippah on my way to synagogue, then I'm going to set up my own little border patrol. And, we're going to be armed, we're going to have baseball bats. Law enforcement does not want that. So that is something that is kind of amazing. The civil rights community and law enforcement have worked very, very closely on hate crimes because law enforcement does not want riots. And if you set up a situation where groups feel like they need to set up their own vigilantes to protect the communities, super bad thing. So even after a successful prosecution, you still need to be able to provide that measure of comfort, and that comes from the community. It's not how many cops with badges are on the beat. It's the community enveloping them, supporting them, empowering them.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that a little bit. I think Matthew Shepard is actually a terrific example of this. The two men who killed Matthew Shepard, both of them are in jail for the rest of their lives. That doesn't mean that the message that they sent with their attack on him wasn't heard around the country. I mean, I'm going to hazard a guess that most of you had heard of Matthew Shepard before you came in today. I mean, his name, that incident, it was not an accident. I don't think anybody woke up, heard about that, and said, oh, what a terrible thing that happened to that young boy. What a horrible accident. It was intentional. It was an intentional message that was being sent, and that message was very much heard around the country. And one of the faults of our criminal justice system is that once a violent crime has been committed, we can't do anything to undo that violence. We can take the perpetrator and we can put that person in jail, and that's justice, and that's the best that we can do. And I mean, truly, what else are you going to do? But that's the best we can do in an individual crime. When it's a hate crime, that hate is out there. And the justice, to the extent that justice came for Matthew Shepard by having both of the perpetrators put in jail, then justice was done. I don't really think that it feels like justice was done, right? There were many people who were hurt by what happened that other than Matthew Shepard. And certainly he lost his life, which is horrible. So my point being that when because hate crimes are a message, and this message is going out to everyone, that just because those specific perpetrators are behind bars doesn't mean that you're not now in fear that this could happen to you. And because there are other people out there who share the same kind of hate. And by having our community reflect that hate in various different ways, there's this constant reinforcement of, okay, yes, this is a bad thing that happened to this one person that I know about, and other people feel that way and they're out here and this could be me.
So from a CRS perspective, there's clearly, I think, a lot to be done. What we think about a lot is, what do you leave behind? What is sustainable? So a conciliator, a longtime conciliator who recently passed away, Manuel Salinas, the work that he was proudest of was a horrible incident where some Latinos were, this is many years ago, this is like in the 70s, I believe, were shot by this situation where at least it was a police officer, and it was unnecessary without going in. It was just a really horrible situation. It was in the way that Mr. Salinas talked about it was a community that wasn't very sophisticated. They didn't know what they didn't know, or they didn't know how to react to it. They were just angry. They didn't know how, they weren't sophisticated at that time of what to ask for from the town, from all that. It's the work that he said he was proudest of, because they formed a committee called El Comité, and it included people who were from the community, who were more likely better educated than some of the folks there. And he was proud because over time it continued. This committee continued. One person from it eventually got elected to the city council. They kept dealing with ongoing issues. They became more sophisticated as time went along. It was for him a place where he felt he left something behind. And it's true today in the work where there's an issue I can think of where there's a violence issue against, say in Wyoming, and there isn't a representative in that community of transgender or LGBT, and then part of the work that we encourage or they do on their own in any of these situations, let's make sure to have representation, let's make sure to have regular meetings. It is the change that can be created over time that happens, right? I certainly remember in 1982 when the Vincent Chin murder happened, of how that, for me, felt the same of what's being talked about, where you feel insecure, where I felt insecure, where I felt a bigger message was being sent and became a rallying point for Chinese Americans and Asian Americans as well. And so that's what I think where the work is. It's hard work. Again, we're limited in resource and what we can do, but I think about how we can continue to help build sustainability. It's an often used word, but I do think about that.
I just wanted to add on to what the director said. Building coalitions. The Wednesday after the Oak Creek shootings, I was watching the news and I saw that there was a candlelight vigil that was organized very close to the Sikh Gurdwara. And at that candlelight vigil, there were community members from a whole host of different faiths and just different community members that were there in support of the Sikh community there. And they had a clear message that this is a no-hate zone, that this incident does not represent Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And when I personally went there, I went there on Wednesday as well, and I went to dinner with my fellow CRS colleagues. And we were about a mile away from the Gurdwara, and I was I mean, I was very aware of my surroundings and circumstances because of the recent events. And I was sitting there at this restaurant, and this elderly lady came up to me and gave me a big hug and said, "I'm very sorry. This doesn't represent us." And when you can build a coalition of people like that together from different faiths and backgrounds and give a statement that, hey, this is not acceptable, that can help in dealing with the pain and suffering and the loss that you feel after such an incident. And just adding on more to what the director said, we work with the different support agencies, whether it be the City Human Relations Commission or the State Human Relations Commission or the Interfaith Council or various advocacy groups, whether it be ADL or the Sikh Coalition or the Human Rights Campaign, in coming together and addressing these issues and talking to them and sharing our grief and sitting there and listening and coming together with to find further solutions to preventing such things. So I think CRS in enabling that discussion to happen is key. And I think that's what really attracts me to CRS, and for you future peacemakers out there, that there's a lot that you can do to get the dialogue going. And once that dialogue goes or continues, you can address ongoing topics. The key thing is to maintain that dialogue and move forward. And that's it.
There's been a lot of great commentary up here, and I think instead of going into my pre-planned questions, I want to make sure that folks in the audience have time to ask any questions that they might have. So I'm going to pass it on to the audience, open it up to the audience for questions.
Hi, thank you very much to the panelists for being here today. I'm a George Mason student, so thank you for coming. I guess I have 3 questions. I'll try to be on my thing. The first is keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening internationally. So have you folded some of that? For example, the law that was passed in Uganda with respect to the death penalty for people who are gay. Because I think that scares people over here and communities over here. Second, helping the community to be prepared. Like, I heard a lot about what you don't know. So for example, many, many years ago, the KKK tried to recruit in my hometown of Long Island. And the faith-based community came together. We had a strong interfaith community. And that's what did it. So the community came together on many different levels, civil and interfaith-based, and they had a rally, and that quashed it. That was the end of it.
Right.
Didn't take a foothold. Equally on my block, in a more intimate setting, one day we had woken up to a letter in our mailbox that went to everyone in our little block, and it said a black family was trying to purchase a house, do not sell, because there's about 5 people on our block selling homes. That was also quashed because why? The people on our street came together in our association, they knew what to do, they met, they talked about it. So helping people to know what to do, even on a small level, like what do people do when they wake up to a letter? Like educating even like the black associations and communities even on that level. How are you helping to do that? And the third point is, or question is, with respect to little kids, I know some of the wonderful work that, for example, Southern Poverty Law Center did on fostering tolerance and putting together a program on teaching tolerance, which is wonderful, and there's so many organizations doing that. But like yesterday, I was reading Goodnight Moon to my little nephew, who's 3.5 months, and I think it begins that young. So what are you doing to help the communities to build sort of educational materials? And this may be in other organizations within the government that are working on this too. But what are you doing to help communities at the grassroots level to build these quality materials throughout all levels of school-age children, even beginning as young as first grade and even younger, to develop the materials?
You're okay.
All right, I'll start. Keeping a pulse on things that are happening internationally. I mean, so just in case not everybody is aware, so there's been a law passed in Uganda that says that homosexuality is a crime punishable by death. So that's pretty awesome. And that one of the really interesting things about some of the really intense homophobia that's been circling around the globe recently is that much of it is exported from the United States, and that many of the groups that are really spreading this horrible types of things are actually our very own American frenemies here. And so, that's I think a really interesting twist on it. I think, certainly having these people be people that we've faced domestically for a long time, knowing a lot of the kind of messaging that they have gives us an advantage, but being so far away, Uganda, my organization is a domestic organization. Our mission isn't to do international work, but it's impossible to not be very worked up by what's going on abroad. And so, it is really difficult. The answer to your question is that keeping a pulse on it is easy because it's loud and it's out there and it's very in your face, and knowing what to do to make it go away is much harder, but something that I think is very, very important to do. And you're right that messages from across the globe are coming back and resonating here, but even if they weren't, the idea that people are being killed because they're gay anywhere is not acceptable. Anybody else want to chime in on the other question?
So first of all, I do have to say, CRS can only work domestically. Just to be clear, that's our lane that we stay into. That being said, Kelly Collins McMurray and others from CRS meet with delegations from other countries interested in the way that we approach. And I think there is a place. Some countries have it, many don't. Something within a Ministry of Justice or a Justice Department of this kind of peacemaking arm to it that can help prevent hate crimes, that can help reduce the tension in communities. I just talked to somebody yesterday. We were often known, in the past we were known as the cool it guys, right? They're trying to cool it, and they're telling people, and it was a 60s sort of thing, I think. That's when it was used more. But that is a way, I think there is something that we can provide internationally in terms of, and we have had retirees who have actually, for example, gone to Belize and done work on reduction of gang violence. So there are folks who have left CRS who have done work internationally as well. In terms of youth, I think there are many folks who have these techniques, these ideas of conflict resolution. I think it's changed dramatically. I'm sure for me, at least, growing up, we didn't have playground mediators. We didn't have all this sort of peer stuff. All the kids get it now, right? My kids who are here at Washington Lee and Swanson down here, they have the chance to be mediators in their school. So I think there is a difference, and these skills clearly can be taught. Reducing that us and them into a we can be done, and I think it is important to start when they're young. There's some wonderful materials. Educators for Social Responsibilities has a wonderful materials. A colleague of mine, Jared Curran, who's a professor at MIT, created amazing materials, taking all the Harvard negotiation project materials and making it totally accessible for kids. Like a 7-year-old can use these things as well. I do want to say last thing, and I've heard from many of the panelists from the first panel as well about how important it is to have something besides litigation. But I do want to say from the conflict resolution side, it's not possible without the litigation either. It's not possible. You have to send a message, the strong message that has to be sent out there. And I know folks, again, I'm from the getting to yes world, but Roger Fisher, who's would always say, have you heard the term, the BATNA? Who's heard of BATNA here? Who's heard of BATNA? The best alternative to negotiated agreement. Yeah. You've got to have a good walk away. You've got to have self-help. You've got to be able to do something on your own. Not everything is about collaboration. Some things you've got to do stuff. Sometimes you have to do it, right? You have to be able to, what's the second best case? How are you going to meet your needs in another way? So I wouldn't want to ever underestimate that, even as a person who spent his career from a collaborative conflict resolution point of view.
Just the last part regarding question you asked about providing educational materials. I think CRS can provide resources and connect the dots based on the case and the circumstance. So if there is a case against a religious bias case, hate crime against the Sikh community, we would definitely provide training materials and identify the appropriate Sikh advocacy groups, key leadership in addressing issues, even having them look at the materials that we've had, whether it be with law enforcement. We have some publications, and you can all see that on our website at www.usdoj.gov/CRT. And I just had to, CRS, sorry. CRT are the other ones. They have good
That's the civil rights
publications too.
division. You can go there too, though.
Yeah.
So we have 2 more questions back here, and I think in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest getting both of them, and then we'll send it back to the panel. All right? Yep.
Hi, I'm a ASCA student here. My question is, what kind of work has CRS done to have dialogue with the other, like such as groups that cultivate a kind of hatred culture, such as the KKK or other groups like that. It's not necessarily a member of that kind of groups that is the perpetrator for a single incident, but they are kind of related because they cultivate that culture, and because you guys talk a lot about forming coalition with leaders, and I'm wondering whether it's just a one-sided or there are attempts to be done.
Well,
I think she wanted to ask 2 questions first, and then we'll take both of them.
My question is completely different. There is a large amount of passion around these issues in this field. What there isn't a lot of is funding. I think that the calls for prevention, I think, is something that everyone in this room is going to uniformly stand behind. What you don't find is the willingness to fund that. CRS has, unfortunately, has to come in to circumstances where the community finally gets, oh yeah, maybe this is something that's valuable, but something very bad has had to happen to make that known to the community. If you're talking about prevention, which is a lot of what the passion is for this work here, how can CRS and these other organizations help bring about funding so that we can do this work?
You want to say?
okay. Well, based on the first question, we do talk to both sides. An example I can give you is that, say the KKK is going to conduct a rally, and on the other hand, the interfaith group and the neighborhood coalition is going to do a counter rally. So we at that point can talk to both parties and provide trainings and providing our peacemaker tools to assist tensions from rising, and also advising law enforcement on how to deal with issues so it doesn't escalate to something greater than it is. So basically, we can communicate with both parties on the front end prior to the day of the rally to understand logistics, to understand how many people are going to be there and what have you, with both sides. So yes, we do, and to get an understanding of what they want to do. Sometimes these groups are more for show and what have you, and they want to make a public display, and so they want to be arrested, and they want the media to cover them. And so working with them and the law enforcement to have that in a smooth fashion where it doesn't cause even greater tension, or even when the rally does occur, talking to their leadership and preventing a conflict from escalating too far or getting violent. So definitely we do talk to both parties and trying to maintain the peace and offer the peacemaker tools that we do have to offer.
So the first question is, it is provocative, right? Because you might make an assumption that we would never talk to the KKK, and it's not true. I was interested, but it does raise issues of, and you all know this from a third party, mediator neutrality. What does it mean to be neutral? What does it mean to enter a situation when you have a belief in one side versus the other? But there's a great situation where one of our conciliators, James Williams, who's African American from in Los Angeles, and was exactly a similar situation what Harpreet was talking about. They want to have a rally, and there's going to be counter protesters at it. They will tell you, folks from the KKK will tell you that they owe their lives to James, that he found ways again to keep them safe. That the job of CRS in those protest situations are to keep people safe. It doesn't matter whether you agree with their perspective or not. I mean, the situation's coming up very shortly right now. There is a park in the South called Nathaniel Bedford Forrest is the name, Park. He is the founder of the KKK. He was a Civil War Confederate general. And the town council has decided to change the name. And now the KKK is going to come, right? So that's a situation where we will be, and where, honestly, maybe the protection that's necessary is more for their safety at this, than it's primarily an African American area now, as well, this park as well. So it is something where we do engage it from that perspective. That is the best example. On the second question, I think it's having folks like Michael and Kate they're the ones who know the stuff, and they're the ones who really understand it, and many other organizations. They can make, I think, the strongest case in some ways for more prevention work by CRS or for others. Daphne will tell you we spent time yesterday at a congressional office, basically trying to educate congressional members about the benefits of CRS. We're right in the middle of sequestration, right? We're right in the middle of hopefully having a CR, having people be able to go to work after March 27th. It's never easy. If anybody here can give me the magic, I'm happy to take your ideas and run with it.
The funding issue is a problem. You have CRS, they have 50 people in the country doing this work. You have Drew Watts from the FBI's Civil Rights section. They're the smallest section in the FBI. You know, people are flying airplanes into the World Trade Center, and the FBI changes its priorities. And, you know, they hire up, hundreds of agents to work on that issue. And the civil rights is very, very small. But I think that we cannot be daunted by that. The funding issue is going to be with us. It is a challenge for us, and we need not to be daunted. I think I'll refer back to the 50-year anniversary of the Selma March. So this is the 50-year anniversary of the 25,000 people Selma March. But 2 weeks before that, there were 600 young people, your age, who were marching, trying to march from Selma to Montgomery. They didn't get very far. They got to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And if you go to Google, you don't have to guess what the Edmund Pettus Bridge looks like, because you can Google it and see what the Edmund Pettus Bridge looks like. You go up, and then you come down. And when they got to the top, they realized that who was waiting for them at the bottom of the Edmund Pettus Bridge? There were Alabama State Troopers on horseback. They were in riot gear. What do you think those 600 people thought was going to happen when they got to the bottom of the Edmund Pettus Bridge? They thought they were going to get the hell beat out of them. And that's what happened. They kept walking down the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There wasn't anybody funding them. They were change agents. They were, on that day, making a statement. They were going to do something about this lack of voting rights in March 7th, 1965. That's what they did that day. That day, what they did was gotten beaten up. And it was on TV, and 2 weeks later, 25,000 people marched, and they actually did get to Montgomery. And a few months later, the Voting Rights Act was passed. So, the funding issue is going to be with us. It's going to be with us. Don't be daunted by that. You're in a community, you're in Cincinnati, you're in Tulsa, you're the one, maybe you're not going to be the best funded, but you have a voice. You have a trained voice on how to work on these issues, and find a coalition and do the best you can. If funding comes, kol hakavod, that's great, fantastic. If it doesn't come, then find the coalition partners. Look at the resources that exist. They have already been created. build off those, make the connections that you have, use the government where you can, and work out from there.
I don't think there's anything I can say after that. What he said.
I agree.
Well, thanks so much. I think we're going to bring this to closing remarks, so I'm going to pass the microphone down.
Oh, I thought it was going to come down this way.
I didn't know
That's fine.
if you were the dean.
Oh, I'll just say, I'm going to close for the whole thing, so I'm going to try to keep as brief as possible as well here.
Yeah.
Is that? Oh,
From there.
oh no, no. Oh, I thought this is for just for us two.
Stay where you are.
Oh, it's okay. I thought we were all. Got it. I understand now. No. Did you want to go first? Go ahead. Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank again Dean Partoli for hosting this. Again, thank you to Jackie and to Kathy. Really, we want to give them a big round of applause. They did a lot of work. Do not go away. We have a spirit program in the afternoon, which I think is really, I think, our most effective combination of training people for skill and then having them accomplish an agreement. So it's a wonderful tool that I think for those of you in the peacemaking world, I think you get a lot out of here. And I would again thank all the certainly thank all the panelists from the first panel. They were, I think, wonderful, and really again they're the foremost experts in really thinking what is a hate crime, what is being prosecuted today, what are the possibilities of that. And certainly want to thank the colleagues on this panel as well. And I say this certainly to the CRS staff in terms of all the great work that you all do in an area where we are constantly without budget. But I would not hesitate, and I believe this with every ounce of every fiber of my body, is that there's an amazing amount we can still do. There's an amazing amount that we can accomplish. When I see what people can do in a situation where I don't expect anything to happen, when I see a conciliator like Charles Phillips take a situation and get an honest conversation between a police chief and an African-American community member and a community in which you think all they're going to do is blame each other, and it becomes something where they take joint accountability. It's an amazing thing, and it's an amazing thing that folks do. Again, I thank you all for coming as students, and I hope it was helpful to the professors who are here. It's a pleasure to meet some of you as well, and I want to thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Dean Partoli.
Delighted to be able to conclude this as a beginning. I think that it's a wonderful way to start something, because it seems to me that the words that we heard today were clearly not hateful. They were words of an intelligent way to look at something very painful, very difficult. And we recognize very well the way in which we can actually hear words that have nothing to do with nothing, but are actually speaking of us as it. Something that is not us, and yet attributes to us qualities, threats, dangers that are not there at all. We are simply becoming this strange opportunity for somebody to coalesce meaning that is not there, it's not me, I don't see it. But we know very well how, is anybody here left-handed? Well, you would be in very bad places a few years ago. Be mancino, sinister. And this was not just one particular culture. It was not just the US. It was in a lot of places. So humans have this capacity to connect and make meaning, and sometimes the meaning is just wrong. We just assume that if you are riding from the left, or if you are dueling with the left, or if you are taking the water with the left, you must be wrong. There is something wrong with you. And I think that conversations like today help us to see how actually our thinking, our talking, and our doing have to do with this capacity to learn. Learn to be better, learn to be human, learn to be human together. And I think that this is a long quest. It's certainly not just something that we can do because we are paid. But it's something we do because we want to survive, because we want to do better, because we want to have a fullness of life. So I just want to welcome all of us to this quest that is going to be very long. ESCAR has been around 30 years. CRS has been around 50. And we realize that in the span of human life, this is very small. But I treasure the idea that the state, the political construction that we are making in academia, can join forces in this nexus in which knowledge and policy come together, practice and policy come together, through learning, through something that we do intentionally. Because in the end, I feel that the big important response to hate crime is actually have a different intentionality. A respectful, engaging, inclusive intentionality. The intentionality of looking at each other as a mystery that is unfolding in front of us because we don't know what is coming. We don't know what is this creative capacity of the human person to actually transform a beating in Selma in a rallying cry for the other 20,000 that were not there the week before, the month before, the years before. And so when I hear about Uganda, and when I hear hate crimes all around the world, my specialty is genocide prevention. So I'm actually very deeply interested in hate crimes because I know that, as Greg Stanton knows very well, hate crimes is part of the mix. It's part of these ways in which humans get together to kill each other big time because of something that is threatening them, that is perceived as a difference that is intolerable. Well, I believe that there is something beautiful and very heartening about this collaboration with CRS-ESCAR collaboration. And I think that our point from the ESCAR side is to keep learning from you, with you, valuing the experience that you are doing, not just because you do it and we want to clap, not just because we want to cheer you up, but rather because we think that learning is actually our duty. The duty to make a world a better place, not just because we see good people doing good things, but because we try to learn why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and how we can make sure that that doing is actually made better. So thank you again, and thank you for this beginning.
Thank you.